Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, Igniting Leadership Excellence. I'm Rick, and this is Emily. This is our second podcast for 2026, and you don't have to be a firefighter to listen to this. We know that we have people from other industries and even including law enforcement that are listening to our podcast. Today, we are happy to have on a guest, Christian Boucousis, a former F-18 fighter pilot, best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and the CEO of Afterburner, a global leadership and human performance company that helps leaders and teams turn chaos into clarity and execution. As a former Royal Australian Air Force fighter pilot, Boo brings a unique perspective on leadership, precision, and performance under pressure that he has translated into real-world business results for thousands of organizations worldwide. His leadership philosophy, flawless leadership, equips teams with practical tools and mindsets to lead with purpose, adaptability, and impact. Boo's work has influenced millions of leaders and is trusted by top organizations across industries, including Microsoft, McDonald's, and the NBA. And Boo, welcome to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick.
Thanks, Rick and Emily. Pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, happy to have you.
Yeah. Emily.
Oh, yeah. So, can you fill in the blanks and tell us more about your background and how you became a pilot and then the type of aircraft that you flew?
Yeah, look, for me, a story like many fighter pilots is really seeing these airplanes when we're kids, when I was a kid. So, I was 5 years old, went to an air show in Australia, and that was the first time I saw fighter jets up close and personal. And you're just sitting there on the grass and watching these massive airplanes taxi past, and the rumble and the noises they flew overhead, and the pilots in their flight suits and helmets and oxygen masks and the shiny canopies. I mean, everything, was just kind of blew me away. And then there was this moment where, this was back in the late 70s where there were less rules. I remember this shadow just coming over the top of me, and I looked up and I felt like I could almost touch this F-18 Hornet as it flew over. And as it flew over, I'm like, oh, where's the noise? Because I was expecting the noise. And it was so fast that, right on the edge of the sound barrier, that just a second later that I got hit by the noise, and I was kind of terrified and crying and laughing and all these mixed emotions. And I think in that moment there, I had this visceral experience. And as I reflect on life, I kind of really appreciate this idea of creating visceral experiences, just experiences that you just feel the depths of your soul. And that was it. I mean, that there was the seed. And then 17 years later, I flew an F-18 Hornet solo for the first time, single seat airplane, all by yourself. And it was an amazing moment. Like everything though, 17 years of effort, and then you land and it's like, oh, I've done it. Right, now what? And unfortunately, I was in a system where you never really master it. You never master the airplane. You never master the mission. It's such a complex, high speed and overwhelming environment that every day is a test. So, I did that for 11 years, all in. I was recruited into the Air Force as a teenager. In Australia, you don't have to go to college to be a pilot. You can join straight from school. So myself and four other guys were a little bit of an experiment. We were the youngest pilots recruited ever. Like, we were recruited when we were 18, but we started flying when we were 19. And all of us made it to jets. We're the only guys that made it to jets, which says a lot about taking mindset and crafting the skill sets to achieve these remarkable athletes, as opposed to older pilots that tend to older recruits that tend to kind of feel more comfortable in their life. When you're a fighter pilot in Australia, you've got to march to work every day. You've got to toe the line, wear your uniform. Like, for someone who's been in the civilian world for 4 or 5 years, it can be a bit overwhelming and a bit like, I don't need to deal with this BS, to be honest. And I flew the Tornado. I went to England and I was on exchange for a while, and I flew another aircraft called the Tornado. But look, they're all the same, right? They're fast. They're complicated machines. You've got to have an incredible depth of knowledge just to be a basic level of fighter pilot. You have to know what every button, cog, a wire, everything does, because any one of those things can go wrong on any day. And if
Mhm.
you're not on top of it, you can put the airplane in the ground, which is not the objective. The objective is to bring it back on the ground with the wheels down,
Yeah.
not a smoking hole. Yeah.
Wow.
That's quite a world there, Boo.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before we got started, being in the Air Force and in the Marine Corps was around aircraft. Obviously, my last unit in the Marine Corps was Marine Attack Training Squadron 203 with the Harriers, the AV-8Bs.
Amazing airplane.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing airplane, and they're just about phased out now out of the Marine Corps. So, with your position there with the Royal Australian Air Force, what's your leadership philosophy?
My leadership philosophy is the leadership philosophy of the Air Force. I mean, there's, whilst your personality can shine through, I mean, it's a system, right? It's a
Mhm.
system from day one. And what's with this flawless leadership perspective, I'm 51 now, right? So I'm at that point in life, and I've been reflecting now for 10 years on really, gosh, why was that the system? And what is it about it that works so well? And it wasn't built at Harvard, and it wasn't created in a college. This system was built at the coalface. And if you think of leadership, that's the whole point, right? Leadership is to serve the coalface, and it's to get whatever we're doing now into the future of what it needs to be later. And I think, you know, when you join the Air Force, the first thing you do is go to officer training. The first thing you do is learn how to be a leader first, and
Mm.
Mhm.
then pilot second. And that's the philosophy. You're always, and we used to say, you're an officer first, then you're a pilot. And for most pilots, it's like, yeah, whatever. I'm a pilot. I don't want what this officer is just something I have to do to get in the cockpit of these airplanes. So I think the system is built to equip leaders who probably don't really want to be leaders. You just want to fly jets. And
Mhm.
the byproduct is they create some pretty, impressive leaders within that organization.
Mm.
And again, the Air Force, like everywhere in the military, every time you make a step, there's a new level of leadership, and you're trained in it. You're
Yeah.
trained in the problems of being a formation leader. You're trained in the problems of being a mission commander. You're trained in the problems of being a flight commander, an executive officer, a commanding officer, a wing commander, a group commander. Every level you go up, you're equipped with the skill sets, which is completely different to the rest of the world, where you're recruited as a skill, and then you're expected to learn about leadership just
Mhm.
by existing day to day. So for me, my passion now is to help build a really simple system, like really, really simple, that anyone can use, and it's not a heavy investment to get there, but to give that basic level of leadership that was born in an environment which is similar to the world today, high speed, information overwhelm, where we're battling for the attention of people. So
Mm.
yeah, so my philosophy on leadership is keep it simple. It's
Mhm.
is number one. Two, understand that there's three dimensions to leadership. There's mindset. I call it the three M's. There's mindset, so how you think. There's method, how you work. And then there's moments, which is the moments you show up as a leader. And there's people leadership moments. There's impact leadership moments, which is the get it done leader. And then
Mm.
there's the leadership in the now, which is all about situational awareness and
Uh-huh.
decision making.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, cool. Before we started, you mentioned, your interest in expanding out to the fire service and the EMS world. And all these years, here we are in 2026, I'm still appalled at least in the American fire service, the lack of leadership training that is taking place. And many times it's a one and done, based off a National Fire Protection Association standards. Somebody will go to a class, but frankly, one of my beefs with leadership in the fire service is all too often somebody comes in and it's that technical aspect, to recruit academy moving on up. And then all of a sudden it's like somebody wants to become an officer and it's like, oh, wow, we should do some leadership training here, versus the military, where we get it right out the gate. And so, there is a gap there.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that it's just because you become an officer doesn't mean that's the first time you lead. I mean, you
Mhm.
lead at every level. The minute you're recruited and you're at the start of your career, you have to be able to understand personal leadership. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
understand the way that you show up and who you are and how you're perceived are two very different things. And for some people, they struggle with that. They feel like, oh, I've got to be disingenuous, or I have to be someone other than who I am. And it's like, not really. You need to be you, but you need to know how you show up in certain situations. Because if you show up as a complicated, indecisive person, which you don't have to be, that's just a choice, then you're not going to serve the people around you. And you're also going to put yourself in a position where something may happen to you that's not good. And if you look at the world today, I wouldn't say that we're in an abundance of good decision making right now. We're in an abundance of what's in it for me decision making. And you've had a long career, Rick, in the fire service, and you know what it's like when you have one of those people, right? Like when you have one of those people in the organization that they're using the organization for themselves.
Yeah.
They're dangerous. They're a dangerous person to have.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump to your book, The Afterburner Advantage. We have some questions related to that, but I want to start out with what led you to write the book?
Yes, good question. So I have in my mind 3 books, which are the 3 M's, and the Afterburner Advantage is really the second M, which is the methodology. So it's kind of a deep dive on the system that trains young men and women to become fighter pilots. So you take effectively a big chunk of clay and you turn it into a pot. And that system is really efficient. It trains thousands of pilots. It works. It's been designed based on the high consequence of it not working, so losing pilots and a loss of life, to getting to where we are an organization where we successfully achieve the mission 99% of the time. So in the Afterburner Advantage, we talk about what we're saying is there is an advantage for you in life and for you organizationally if you just start working a little bit different. And it's a reflection on 30 years of Afterburner. So I didn't found Afterburner. It was founded by a Air National Guard fighter pilot, Jim Murph, in 1996. So this is our 30th anniversary this year.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah, so it's got some legs, and then as he retired, I was just jokingly talking to him on the phone one day about buying the company. I was doing it in Australia, but I was also a property developer and semi-retired, and I just love because it's my story. Because when I left the Air Force, I've been in business for 21 years now. So for me, using the fighter pilot stuff in business is just my DNA, and it worked for me. So I know it works both theoretically and practically. And when he said, yeah, okay, give me an offer, I did. And I moved to the US 2.5 years ago. And I've taken it from being a process and method company into a leadership company that also does process and method. If you think about the way you live your life, there's those things like brushing your teeth, starting your car, doing up your shoelaces, all of that is just unconscious habit forming behaviors. And you can create that automation as a leader as well. And when you create that automation as a leader, what it does, it frees up your creative processes a lot more. So the Afterburner Advantage was a reflection of 30 years, the almost 4,000 companies we've worked with over 30 years. And some of the things that we do as human beings that aren't very performance type of activity, and then how you get there. And deep, fundamentally, what it's about is just growing every day. Like, that's a leader's job, right? You've got to grow yourself. You've got to grow the people around you. And it's a deliberate way called plan, brief, execute, debrief that allows you to do that. So and really simply, I mean, you don't even need to buy the book. This is all it says is when you plan together, you plan often, and you plan small. So before you do something, think about it. We talk about brief by name, brief by nature. But the important concept in a fighter pilot brief, it's not what the pilot says, it's what everyone else understands. So it's around bringing awareness to people. And that's the first stepping stone of situational awareness. Build a destination, build an objective, make sure everyone understands what it is, and then go do it. And that's what the execution's about. And execution is as simple as stay focused, don't get distracted, and understand that in today's world, you are distracted more than any other time in human history. But again, you're in control of that. You just let yourself be distracted. And then finally, debrief. So when we finish something, we unpack it. And we say, is what we did what we planned? If it was, did it work? If not, why not? And what are we going to do differently tomorrow? And what it does is it just mitigates human nature, because humans by nature are motivated to be busy, even if it's ineffective. We tend towards busyness. which
Yeah.
means that whatever's in front of us is the most important thing rather than focusing on what matters.
Mhm.
And it's quite primal. And what I realized about the Air Force was the whole system is designed to mitigate human weakness. The whole system is designed to make sure that humans lift themselves each day, that they don't require external motivation, that they don't require external stimuli. That's part of it. But ultimately, it's all about you. It's about what you can control. And one of the best lessons I learned from one of my leaders as a fighter pilot was I had a question one day around how one of our weapons worked. Uh, and I asked him, I said, what fuse setting is this? And he goes, have you read it? I mean, what do you mean? He goes, have you gone to the manual and have you read the manual? I said, no. And he goes, go read the manual. And if you don't understand it, come and ask me a question. And I read the manual and obviously it answered the question. I didn't need it. But what he demonstrated was, and this happens in business all the time, this escalation, this constant deferral of knowledge and deferral of decision makers to someone else. It just taught me that it's the information you need is there. If your job is to find information and knowledge, and if you don't understand it, then ask a question, rather than expect the leaders to know all and tell you what to do. And this process does that. It basically puts the onus on the individual. Find the data, come up with a plan, red team it with someone else. So make sure you bounce that idea off someone and what you're going to do, and then go do it. So we have all these checks and balances to really tame the primal mind, the emotion and reactive side of humanity, and really bring some intention and thoughtfulness to it. And that's what the world needs. It's what the chief of a firehouse needs. It's what an individual firefighter means. It's just that before you impulsively do something, before you react, think, act. Just stop.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Is everyone on board? Any questions? Let's test this out. Right, let's go do it. And then when we're back down into the quiet and calm of the firehouse, let's pull it apart. Let's just sit there. Let's just ask ourselves, did we execute the standards? If not, why not? What did we miss? Do the standards need to be updated? Let's go do that again better tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a great way to live your life. I mean, if it makes people have meaningful conversations. It puts people into critical thought mode rather than passive receive mode. And the byproduct of that, if you do it every day, is the opportunity to grow 37 times every year, 37 times more than what you are now in the new year by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's great. When you talked about, finding the answers, Boo, I had a flashback to when I was in the Marines, because they took me out of crash crew and put me in the aviation operations because there was too many NCOs in crash crew. So the first day of class, I walk in, and on each of the desks, I mean, there are a stack of manuals that had to have been about 1.5 feet high, and I about choked. It's like, what in the world is this all about? It didn't take long that the staff sergeant told us, is like, don't ever tell anybody you don't know. Is what you're going to do is you're going to find out of these stack of manuals where the answer is. You don't need to know the answer. You just need to know where to go
Yeah.
to get it.
And that's
Yeah.
where AI today is so powerful. I mean, you can put that manual in AI and ask it very specific questions and get a very, very specific answer. The problem is that the working knowledge you lose because you're putting the
Right.
working knowledge. You're by default reactive because you're asking questions in a current situation. You're not predictive. You're not looking for. So I think there's a risk in society that we lose the wisdom of getting
Yes.
into a manual, of reading a
Yeah.
book, of pulling it apart.
Yeah.
But so this method kind of replaces that. It's kind of like, because I mean you think about it, and we know this because we've worked with fire departments. Is sometimes after an incident, everyone's so exhausted they just go home. And we don't preserve the 10, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to really debrief it.
Yeah.
Nor do we debrief the false alarms or the small things that happen. Because even if you're responding to a false alarm, there may be just one thing. One firefighter may have forgotten something. Someone may not have been prepared. We may have been out 20 seconds too late. Like there's always something to learn, even when it's not actually the mission itself. Like we'll debrief a mission as fighter pilots, even if it's cancelled due to weather. We'll still debrief the planning process. We'll debrief the decision we made around the weather. We'll use it as an opportunity to talk about weather, which we don't normally have the opportunity. But now we've got this whole hour and a half of time because we're not on the mission to do some deep diving on the weather. What's the effect on the aircraft? If we did get airborne, what some of the things that could have happened. So you've always got this opportunity for contextualized learning, which is,
Yeah.
I think, a more valuable style of learning than just generically learning.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there, and I think so many times in the fire service, if people are reluctant just to do a tailboard, debrief, to find out what happened, but I think that reluctance is tied to we don't know how. People haven't been taught how to debrief, which is something that you're addressing right here uh, in your book.
Yeah. Can you talk
Yeah, and it
about,
only came about because so many pilots were dying. Like it wasn't
oh,
like we
wow.
thought, hey, here's a great human performance model and let's do this. It was engineered to stop people from not coming home,
Yeah.
Mm,
and the fire service wants the same number of firefighters that go out to come back, right? Like that's the goal. The firefighting is the mission, but it's not going to last very long if people don't come home. And I
Right.
think where it's challenging is the psychology of debriefing. So a fighter squadron,
mm,
probably more so in a firehouse. I mean, that's a family, right?
Hmm.
That's more like a mum and dad family style of leadership, where you try debriefing at home. It's very hard because it's a way more emotional space because people feel hurt if it's not done right. And
Yeah.
so a philosophy that we talk about in the book is nameless and rankless. And
Hmm.
what that means is we understand that families and organizations are very political, sensitive environments. That's why we just park it for 15 and 30 minutes and we focus on data and we focus on what's right, not who's right. And just bringing those two philosophies to your debriefing gets people away of the fear of having a
mm,
conversation where they say, I made a mistake today. And in the book, we kind of use the Blue Angels as a case study and how they,
Hmm.
will spend 2 hours after every display, and they might do 2 or 3 in a day during the training season. And if that's where the learning happens, it's not. Yeah, you learn a little bit on the mission, but most of the learning happens afterwards when your brain has the capacity to take it in
mm,
because it's not on the tools anymore. It's not holding a fire hose. It's not dealing with the stress of a dangerous situation. The learning happens. We call it the 1G environment. Like in an airplane, we pull up to 9G, which is not a good time to be thoughtful. You're literally trying to stay conscious. So the thinking time happens before in a 1G environment and after when we're calm, when the right structures of the brain are full of blood and energy. That's the opportunity that's lost. And I know in the fire services that this is doesn't happen as a ritual because I had the opportunity to speak at Texas A&M with almost 1,000 fire chiefs, ambulance and law enforcement officers, and
mm,
afterwards they're like, "Yeah, we don't do that. Like that's something we don't do after every mission." And as I walked in to do that keynote, there's a shrine with all the EMS personnel that lost their lives that year.
Hmm.
mm,
Uh, and since the start of the fire school there, Teaks. And when I walk past that and I go into a keynote, I'm like, that's why you debrief to have less people on this table. So this
Hmm.
shrine doesn't have as many people. And there was a lot of people in that year.
mm,
And that's not just in the service, it's to suicide. That's all the other stuff that
Yeah.
comes with being a first
mm,
responder, as well
mhm,
as because this debrief from a psychology perspective is quite similar to cognitive behavioral therapy and post-traumatic stress therapies, where
mm,
you take the emotion out of the moment and you deconstruct it logically. So I think that investing in debriefing not only helps the unit perform better, but more importantly, it helps people in a psychologically safe environment get the dark and the inner monologue out with a peer group that understands and can support you better.
Yeah. Yeah. When I first got promoted to
fascinating.
battalion chief, I was in charge of a shift. And after, we had an incident that I was assigned to or a drill, I was running the debrief. And then I think it was probably maybe a year and a half to 2 years into it. I had an epiphany. It's like, hey, Davis, why don't you shut up and let them talk first? And I started that, Boo. And it just like, we went around. And what I found, there was one time where one guy really screwed up and everybody knew he screwed up and he wasn't saying anything about it. Whereas everybody else, if they, did something wrong, they were bringing it up. And that was the one time I had to say to him, "Is like, is there anything else you want to say?" And then he fessed up in front of the group. But I found much more value in just letting them talk
Yeah.
about what happened than me running my yap.
Yeah, and in the book, we another case study is the New York Giants that the company worked with back in 2011, 2012. And it was exactly the same thing. And this is a lost opportunity for all NFL teams, is the way that they review is the coaches talking at the players and pointing out to the players what they did wrong and what they do next time. So with the Giants, we kicked the coaches out of the room and the players debriefed the training, they debriefed the games, and then the coaches came in at the end. And to your point, the bits where either a player just didn't understand, like I just ran the play incorrectly, and I just didn't understand it. That is where the coaches come in and they lift. They then coach. Sometimes coaching gets confused with telling, like telling people
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah.
Coaching is guiding people on their own learning journey, because that's when it sticks. And I worked with a professional sports team in Australia that lost seven games in a row, and I went into the debrief. I kicked out the coach. And it was just one play that in front of the coach, they nodded and they knew what to do. But in private, they didn't actually know what to do. And every time they tried to run this play, which was the play to kind of regain momentum, they just did it wrong. And it contributed. So all we did was spend 5 minutes. We ran through the play. Everyone understood, and they won the next 8 games in a row. So it's,
Wow.
and that's what you're trying to uncover. It's the success is hidden away. It's in the conversations we're avoiding. And debriefing brings them out and allows us to. And it's a bit clunky at first if you haven't done it, because people try and go real heavy, real quick. So we always say start debriefing inconsequential things. So, debrief the hoses not being tidy. Debrief the floor being wet. Debrief small things, and then over time. Because if you think about it, every major incident is a chain, right? The major incident part happens as the last small thing. So a big part of debriefing and why we use it in aviation is the more small near misses we course correct, the bigger accidents don't happen. And in Australia, we had 36 years without losing an airplane, 36 years without losing a fighter jet, which is unheard of in any other air force.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
That's amazing. So in your book, you talk about flawless execution. Is that what you've covered already, or is that different than what we've been talking about?
That word flawless, we have flawless execution and flawless leadership. And when we talk about flawless, we're talking about a mindset. And it's funny when you talk about this mindset, because people, I hang out with a lot of speakers, and I remember going to a speaker workshop and I said, hey, fighter pilots win 99% of the time. Flawless is about 99%. It can't be perfect, but you can get close. And everyone's like, oh, this is garbage. No one can do that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and it just made me realize, it's like, if you walk out the door thinking you can't be that, you will never be that. If you instantly say, I cannot reach those heady heights, I will guarantee you won't get there. But if you set the benchmark to be flawless, which means invest in what you can control, understand that you're never going to be perfect, but to get as close to perfection as possible, you need to debrief, reflect, and grow.
That's really good.
Boo, I've been studying rapid decision-making, situational awareness since 2007. It resulted from a drill that I was running for my shift, and things, they didn't go well. So I've really been digging into that. And part of that is John Boyd's OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And you touched on that in your book. Could you explain to our audience how the OODA loop fits into the plan, brief, execute, debrief?
Yeah, so OODA loop is really just iterative thinking. So basically it means that no matter what you see or do and what decision you make, you can always do it differently next time. So when the OODA loop is observe, orientate, decide, act. So to have situational awareness, you have to be aware of your environment. So you have to observe it, right? Then you need to position yourself based on what you see. You've got to be in a position to take advantage of this situation. then you make a decision, you act, and then you observe again what happened. What we did with Afterburner, though, and it was pretty an important nuance with OODA, is we introduced intention. So OODA is based on observing something that exists, whereas often we have to go into environments where nothing exists. It's in the future, so who knows? So when we talk about plan, what we're really saying there is set an intention, then brief it so everyone understands it, then make a decision and act, which is execution, and then reflect on it, which is debrief. So OODA's basically in a moment. How do you reorientate your thinking? And when you do deep work on John Boyd, he goes into intention and unpacks OODA a lot more. But we just kind of wanted to simplify it another level for people that aren't fighter pilots, and say, hey, look, come up with a plan, make sure everyone understands, do it, reflect on it. And then you will be true to the OODA philosophy by doing that, because it's also iterative.
Yeah. When you talk about looking down the road, that ties in with her name's Micah Ansley. If you're familiar with her, she's done a lot on situational awareness in the aviation world with the Air Force, the military, civilian aviation. She has identified 3 levels of situational awareness: perception, comprehension, and then where it ties into what you just said, projection. That person who's got that experience, being able to look forward and project, well, this is what's going to happen next, or what could happen next.
Yeah, we expand on that concept in the next book, Flawless Leadership. And we talk about perception, processing, projection. That's the first 3 steps of a decision. And perceptions are very personal. I mean, a perception is how someone sees the world through their eyes. Yeah. So if you have situational awareness for 10 people, is actually 10 different types of situational awareness. Yes. But you need to create one collective awareness, and that's what planning does. Then we go from projection into the decision itself. And then decision drives action. The action delivers or doesn't deliver results, and then that makes an impact. So when we talk about a decision, we talk about most decisions are made on a perception, which isn't reality. We find the data to support it, and then we project it into a non-existent future. So decisions are, generally speaking, pretty average. The average human's decision's pretty bad. And the higher you go up in the leadership hierarchy, the more impact those bad decisions have, because you're driving a lot of activity that is, generally speaking, not delivering results. Statistically, only 20 to 30% of companies actually deliver on strategy. And the emotional impact of that is a negative impact, right? Which then shapes your perceptions again. So you end up in this downward spiral if you're not careful, where you lose trust, you lose credibility, people defer, delay, or avoid decisions, and there is no awareness at all. It's just chaos. It's just total reaction. So for us, the whole job of a fighter pilot is to create situational awareness for themselves, but also for others. So how does my awareness serve this person? And there's a whole bunch of stuff we do to do that. We have these ideas, these concepts like talk by exception, which means if you don't have anything of value to add to someone else, don't speak. Like, just don't add more information, right? It's already hard enough making decisions as it is. So make sure that your conversation is in the context of the plan, right? Like that's the whole point of it. We talk about situational awareness having to be anchored to a destination. So you think of it as an airliner, right? When you get on an airliner, the captain doesn't get on board and say, welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen. This flight, our goal is to get to Boston. I mean, can you imagine if they said goal? Everyone would be like, whoa, I actually want to get there. And so subconsciously we understand that for a human being, a goal is something that's nice to get. It's not a destination, which is I have to get. And that's important for situational awareness, right? You can't have situational awareness with aspiration and intention. Situational awareness requires definition, and it requires destination thinking. And there's a massive absence of that in most organizations.
Yeah.
So situational awareness is a powerful concept.
Yes.
It's something that is well understood in first responder world. In the military, we actually use those words. But you think about the average firefighter or the law enforcement officer or the fighter pilot, we use it at work, and one of the things I try and help people understand is, but you don't bring it home. You don't use the same thinking in the cockpit at home. In a cockpit, you would never be as emotional as you are at home. You would never be as judgmental as you are at home. You would never lack the curiosity of your partner and your kids that you bring to work. So what's really interesting is we have situational work awareness. We think it's a work thing, but it's a life thing. Like you won't hurt someone's feelings if you're situationally aware of their feelings. If you understand their expectation and you help them get there, rather than judge the actions that they're taking, you will create situational awareness. So this whole idea of, and I think the woke movement in itself is trying to bring some situational awareness to certain people and minorities, but at the same time, it's doing it in an intention-fueled way, not a what's the point of it all? The pendulum swung too far. So, it's everything we see in the world is just a complete lack of awareness and everyone just existing and being pushed and prodded by the algorithms on their social media, by the loudest voice in the room. So for me, I really want to bring a reflective practice to leadership where we're creating awareness because we're always talking about what we're doing and where we're going, and we're being open and honest of why we're not there yet. And what is it for me as a person that I need to tweak? What are my biases, beliefs that are driving my behaviors so I can be a better version of myself tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah. With the situational awareness the understanding of situational awareness I've seen through the majority of the fire service, and including wildland and emergency management, it's based on the circumstances. Well, the fire, grew X number of acres last night. It's at this geographical point, right now. And then it's like, well, we have situational awareness. So no, you have an awareness of what it did, but it doesn't encapsulate that mental thinking part of what does that really translate into to our
Yeah, I used to deliver a program in Australia to the Rural Fire Service. And in Australia, everything that's not kind of metropolitan fire is a volunteer service. There's a few full-timers in there. So I used to teach debriefing at their academy for the same philosophy, because with volunteers, you've only got them for this very small period of time. They have 3 or 4 training opportunities at the unit. In Australia, we have a ton of bushfires, right? So brush fires, forest fires. So really, they're launched into these situations, and unfortunately, we lose people. Like they get overwhelmed by the fire front, they perish. So they certainly saw that we have to accelerate learning. We in these moments of time, we have to learn as fast as possible with these volunteers, and that's the other great thing about debriefing. It's an accelerated learning curve. Like it's every moment. If we sit down with a peer group, nameless, rankless, focus on what's right, not who's right, you are guaranteed to learn something that is going to, first and foremost, help you survive, and secondly, get the fire contained as soon as possible to minimize risk to life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for sake of time, I mean, let's jump down right there to that question.
Which one?
This one right here.
Okay. So you wrote about the sophomore risk and said, quote, sometimes people who ought to know better just aren't paying enough attention to what's going on. How does that tie in with task saturation?
Yeah. So the sophomore risk is really, when you think you know enough because you've got a basic level of understanding to start making complex decisions. You don't understand the nuance. And if you look at the accident curve, when it comes to aviators, the aviator that's recently qualified is a higher risk than the trainee. And then it also starts to come up again, the more experienced. So if you see a lot of air show accidents and a lot of accidents where you see very experienced pilots, they have the same problem in that they just rely on their experience. Their knowledge is what it was 20 years ago because they haven't invested in a growth journey. They don't use every day as a learning opportunity. And I presented to thousands of pilots before that are not fighter pilots, and it's like, oh yeah, I really should debrief after every flight. So the sophomore risk is like informed enough to be helpful, but also to be dangerous. And the problem is because they don't know the detail, they set ambitious targets. There's 2 other biases that are associated here. One is called the optimism bias, where I think humans are engineered to be optimistic and do crazy stuff, or we wouldn't grow, right? But that's like a painful way of growing where we think everything's easier than it actually is. And
Yeah.
the second one is the planning fallacy, which is
Mhm.
just because I planned it, it's going to happen,
Yeah.
and that doesn't happen. So what happens is they end up being very reactive because they're not aware of the details. They haven't read the manuals. They don't know the impact of every action of one person on the team to the next person. So the whole thing deteriorates into hundreds and hundreds of reactive activities
Mhm.
rather than a simple aligned framework for everyone to do what needs to be done at the right time.
So,
Interesting.
well, Boo, we've been at this now coming up on about 45 minutes, and I want to be respectful of your time. And I want to encourage our listeners, and I mentioned this in classes that I do around the country for firefighters. Look at the aviation world, look at what's taking place in the aviation world, and translate that into the fire service. So, as we wrap up, Boo, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close down?
No, I think for me the big takeaway in leadership is don't get comfortable. Don't feel like your experience is what's going to get you through. I think, and also don't underestimate your ability to lead, even if you're not in a definitive leadership role. Like everyone can be a leader,
Mhm.
but to lead, you have to be aware of where you're going, and everyone on a team, whether you're the leader of the team or a team member, needs to clearly understand that when I do all of the activity and the work, something has to happen as a result of that.
Mhm.
And that to me is a very unique way of thinking and of communicating and of working, where leaders get away from this is what you do. Why did you do that wrong? To your kind of conversation, Rick, which is let them talk. Ask the people around you, what were you trying to achieve? And then through asking that question, you start to unpack the thoughts that are going on inside their head rather than them be worried about being judged for just doing the wrong thing. That little nuance for leadership, be intention driven and curiosity motivated, is
Mhm.
is how I think we can kind of get leadership back on track in the world.
That's great.
That's
So,
great.
Boo,
Yeah.
tell people, our listeners, how they can contact you, contact your company, and get a copy of your book.
Sure. So just Amazon, obviously, if you want the book, that's an easy one. It's called The Afterburner Advantage. You can get it on the website as well. I have two websites. I have a personal one, which is callmeboo.com. And I have the Afterburner website, which is just afterburner.com, which is our training and development programs that help build flawless leaders.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Boo, for coming on here today with
Yeah.
Emily and I. And folks, if you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share. My contact information is in the show notes. You can learn more about the services that I have to offer, and you can have a link to my website. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.